Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Thank you for coming to bring your life science content management strategy to the digital age. Over the next 40 minutes, we're going to be covering a variety of topics. We're going to start with the biggest challenges faced with going digital, and Kevin Barrett, our Managing Director of Document Solutions, is going to give us a little bit of overview over that. Then we're going to go into the content management transformation opportunities, and we have Riju Khetarpal from Box here. He's the Managing Director of Life Sciences at Box. Then we're going to go back and we're going to see how regulated content management is changing. And Kevin Barrett's going to give us an introduction to our eTMF solution. And we're going to finally finish with a panel discussion where Frederico Braga is going to join us on stage for some questions and answers. So to kick us off, I'll hand it over to Kevin.
Very good. Good afternoon, everybody. Are you enjoying the conference so far? Yes? Let's see if we can help you enjoy it just a little bit more. My name is Kevin Barrett. I don't remember my lips being that red. However, I am the Managing Director of Document Management Solutions at Medidata. I am also the artist formerly known as the Chief Executive Officer of Cheetah, which was acquired in February this year by Medidata. And prior to Cheetah, I was Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer with Elan. Some of you may have heard of it, Elan Pharmaceuticals, Elan Corporation, a position I held for over 10 years. And I'm about 20 years in the pharma and biotech industry. And as CIO, boy, did we have problems with regulated content management systems. And these problems arose and for a number of reasons, but just let's look at them. Elan, like many pharma, were geographically spread. This amplified the size of the problem around regulated content management. And of course, and in fact, I was talking to a customer about it yesterday, this is a huge problem around regulated content management systems, particularly when you're having to manage them. And then finally, collaboration and partnerships. All of this give rise to a multiplicity of content management solutions. Now, that might sound bad, but it's actually worse. First of all, you've got increased costs, because you've got a multiplicity of platforms. You've got some doing this, some doing that, and so on. You've got security issues, because you've got different security models around each and every system. And then, of course, you've got an increase for the different sets of skills, some Documentum, some Viva, some OpenText, some Box, some Microsoft SharePoint, and so on. And then, of course, you're dealing with multiple vendors. This near killed us. We had 37 vendors who were supporting the totality of clinical operations. Think about that now for a second. 37 vendors. That means 37 commercial agreements, 37 different sets of service level agreements, and then, of course, you have to go and integrate the things. This all gives rise to huge cost, huge pressure, and a very, very poor user experience. Then you get the emergence of shadow IT, because the business gets sick and tired of the way it is, and they bring in their own services. They go to the likes of Box, they go to Dropbox and others. And of course, you end up in an unhappy user community. Trust me, from a CIO seat, that is never a good thing. And then, of course, poor search for content. As I always said, what is the point in putting content in any system if you can't get it back again? And therefore, search is vitally important. So, the business impact, however, was also severe. Significant waste of time searching for content. I mean, nobody wants to search for anything. People want to find things. It's the find that adds value. And then, of course, they got so frustrated that they started recreating content because it couldn't be found. There is this famous story told of a biotech that ran a phase 2 for a particular drug some years later, and it concluded with failure. Some years later, they decided, we could actually use the same molecule for a different indication. They could not find all of the phase 2 documents and data. That was a $50 million mistake. They had to rerun the study. So recreating content is a very, very real problem. And then, of course, you've got difficulty collaborating across business units and geographic locations, and this is truth. Collaborating across a multiplicity of different content platforms means you have to communicate by email. If you can't communicate within the system, you have to use another common denominator, and email is not very good as a collaboration tool. Then, of course, processes and workflows aren't harmonized. Notwithstanding the fact that the users get confused about which process they should follow, you also end up with regulatory exposures around multiple processes. And then it becomes just harder and harder for people to do their job well, which leads to frustration, and it's morale deflating. This all sounds very bad. At Elan, we fixed the problem, and I think we'll be sharing a lot with you as to how we did just that. And with that, I would like to introduce my good friend, Riju from Box.
Thanks, Kevin. Am I supposed to talk about how I fixed the Elan problem? No.
Which you didn't.
Which you did. So, hello, everybody. My name is Riju Khetarpal. I'm the Managing Director for Life Sciences at Box. And I'm going to have a handful of slides. And what I'm going to talk about today are a couple things. The first one is sort of the Box point of view on content management, what our role is, we believe, in the IT stack at organizations, including life sciences. Our Chief Product Officer, Jeetu, was here this morning in Glenn's keynote, and he had a little perspective as to where we fit in. Then I want to talk about the challenges that we see within our customer base within life sciences and how the Medidata partnership is a very critical component for at least Box to make some initiative in helping address those challenges. So let's kind of get into this quickly. The environment that Kevin just talked about actually still is sort of essentially the same. The big difference between, say, 15, 20 years ago in terms of drug development and the IT systems that were used for content management and now is things are excessively more mobile now, which means you potentially have even less control on your content. Things are a lot more moving towards the cloud. 15 years ago, that was not a challenge, but now it is. So now you have cloud-based systems. Legacy systems are sort of coming off of maintenance, if you will, where you are just dragging them along because they're qualified and validated for 21 CFR Part 11, and you don't necessarily want to make the jump till you have to, right? So you have all of these dynamics working, and now drug development is getting even more complex. In the last few years, if you look at what's happening in clinical development, and we got a flavor of that this morning from Glenn, things are becoming more complex. We're solving harder problems. To solve harder problems, you have to go around the world and do more research and collaborate more. And that general environment is the challenge that our customers at Box within the life sciences space are also facing. In addition to that, what they're struggling with is in the last 15 years, if you look at what's happened to content management, it's literally been 4 different generations of systems. It started with things you already know, right? Like file shares and intralinks and Documentum in the early 90s. And then all of a sudden, there was this flux of regulated packaged applications, right? Before everything was custom in the 90s. And now you had Documentum coming up with a suite. You have, OpenText coming up with a life sciences suite. You have master control, Viva more recently in the cloud space. So it's like, wow, here's a packaged application. Let me go buy that instead of developing it. While at the same time, the ease of content management that was promised by vendors like Box, for example, or Dropbox or Google Drive, et cetera, that was really attractive to be able to sort of democratize content management for all of your users outside of regulated content too. So that was another jump. And now what we're really looking at is, wow, can I use some of these other public clouds like Amazon and Microsoft and et cetera and do some content management on it too? So the challenge you run into now is we have great jumps in technology. Things are getting better. But along the journey, I bought a little bit of everything. So you are still ending up with a mess like this, right? That's like the current challenge. You could draw the same jigsaw thing 15 years ago, it would just have different vendors in it, right? So now you have siloed content. If you do your absolute best job within the IT group, you're going to end up with 2 systems. There will be a regulated system, and there will be a non-regulated. That's your absolute best job you have done, right? Which inherently is a challenge because other industries don't do that, right? But in life sciences, we do. And then you end up with, if you have multiple systems of records, you are going to run into email as a collaboration tool because you're porting content from one place to another. If there is no formal way to do it and the IT folks don't have time, they're like, I'm going to download it, put it in email, and send it out, right? So the exposure becomes a lot greater because now these things are mobile. They're potentially in the cloud. And they're in email, which is very, very insecure if you guys have, listened to some of the stories lately. So to be able to address these challenges, what we see within our customer base now is these challenges are very real. We have learned a lot at Box, being in the non-regulated space, from our customers over the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years more so than before. And with 800 customers in pharma, biotech, med device, and CROs, and roughly 900,000 users within this industry, what we are finding is customers are saying, look, this is actually more unmanageable now with cloud moving from legacy, these 4 generations of content that have arrived, than it was before. And I really need to put some kind of control in it. And this whole digital transformation thing is really a headache because users are saying, I don't want to use Documentum anymore, for example, right? Because the UI is not that great. So as they think about digital transformation and they start working with us, we try to take them on a journey, right? This is not going to happen overnight, and it's going to be a journey that's going to take, kind of step by step. And the very first thing in digital transformation that we recommend to our customers is, look, if you're in an increasingly mobile environment, you have compliance issues, you have to deal with things like regulatory bodies in different parts of the world, and your users are excessively mobile, you have to centralize core services. You can't have decentralized content and decentralized users. That's hard to manage. So you have to kind of go back into centralizing services. So the very first thing our customers have traditionally done is centralized content repositories, and that's just for the sheer sense of control. When they start standardizing content or centralizing content, one of the use cases that we see in productivity, and a lot of pharma companies are doing this today, is take approved content, for example, for promotional use, and start putting it on mobile devices for their sales reps. It's a very simple thing. You're distributing content, but the reason they're doing that on Box is because of the level of control that we offer them on these mobile devices. We can still track exactly what's happening to that content from that mobile device. We have great audit trails. We can tell you which physician a specific sales rep shared this content with, right? So it's all in the audit trail. As they move along the journey, what we have seen customers do is start taking the centralized repository of content and start leveraging it in third-party applications. A great example of this is Salesforce or Force.com, for example. Lots of Force.com in the pharma space. Salesforce is really good at workflows. You can do kind of process integration, but it's essentially marginal at handling content. They don't encrypt at rest. Large files have trouble kind of moving around. So what we see customers do is take the Box APIs that Jeetu talked about this morning and use that to expose content within a Salesforce application. You can do the exact same thing with Nintex and so on and so forth. That's where things start getting interesting for our customers. Now, the journey that our customers, a lot of our sophisticated customers are entering into now is what they are saying is, look, I have the Box user interface, which is pretty good, which is kind of what you log into if you are a user of Box. I have a way to expose Box content in third-party applications, but what I really want to do is build my own digital experiences that are very unique to my industry within the regulated content management space and be able to still use Box content. Now, it would be super awesome if Box was out there building a trial master file, but we don't have the domain expertise to do that. So on that end, where our partnership with Medidata comes in. So we have partnered with Medidata essentially for the purpose of bringing packaged regulated applications on the Box platform, right? So a trial master file, an archiving solution, SOP management, and there are a couple more that are coming shortly. And our goal with Medidata is to help Medidata build a suite of tools that are going to address the very unique domain-specific challenges for life sciences companies. Now, the benefit our customers get, these 800 plus customers, and hopefully most of them will buy the Medidata application, is that now you have a single repository of content that can manage regulated and non-regulated content with the security controls in place, with the compliance in place, with the regulatory requirements like 21 CFR Part 11, et cetera, in place. And we are seeing this trend taking off literally like fireworks, at least here in the US and a little bit in Europe as well. And a big reason for that is we have done a lot of work on the compliance side. Like, for example, everyone's concerned about GDPR right now. If you have European operations, GDPR is like a real thing. And Box has already made the investments. We're GDPR ready, right? We already offer data residency requirements to be met in places like Germany, Ireland, Japan, Singapore, et cetera, right? So now this content is portable, it is secure, it's compliant with local regulations if needed, and at the same time, it's centralized in a way where you can leverage it for different uses. So that's our value proposition to the market. And we're really glad to be partnering with Metadata for this. So, oh, this one. Yeah, this is, I kind of already spoke through this, but our value proposition to our customers is you can have regulated content, you can have non-regulated content, you can have your domain-specific applications, but Box can be the centralized place where all your work comes together. So if you have control on the content, then you have control on the processes that you're leveraging the content for. And that's essentially what we are driving towards in life sciences. So with that, Kevin, I am going to hand this back to you.
Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you indeed, Riju. So changing how regulated content is managed. I believe if the technology works, you're about to see a video of Medidata's ETMF.
Clinical trials are changing around us. Sponsors run trials at sites throughout the world, led by an increasingly mobile workforce in countries with unique regulations and compliance considerations. Trial sponsors need to be able to standardize and automate their trial master file content. Medidata ETMF changes the game, providing an integrated solution that is clean, simple, and intuitive. Built with the end user in mind, it's easy to work with life sciences content while maintaining compliance. And its validated platform is built for the digital workplace, integrated from study planning to study close. Medidata ETMF is fully integrated with Box, providing the industry's best user experience for creating, storing, and collaborating on all content. Medidata ETMF accelerates study startup, while first-of-its-kind content verification technology ensures compliance and inspection readiness along the way. This all lives in the industry-leading Medidata Clinical Cloud, bringing together study data and regulated content on one platform. Clinical trials are built on compliant data and content, and that data and content is built on Medidata ETMF.
So there we go. That's a quick sneak preview of Medidata's ETMF. Now, when I say built for the end user, we really do mean built for the end user. Again, as a CIO of a pharma, the life sciences professionals that I was dealing with, I mean, I felt the pain that they were suffering every single day. And when we decided to build something new, something different, we built it through the eyes of the people who actually have to use it every single day. And when you see the product and see how easy it is to use, I'm a little bit high, am I? Well, high on volume anyway. When you see the product and see how intuitive it is, it guides you through the processes that you need to follow to get the job done. Most important. I've always said this, the content is data. This whole notion, I mean, clinical trials, I suppose, is a game of two halves. There's the content half and the data half. That always seemed to me to be incorrect, because content is, in fact, data. And now, with the way we have structured it, you've got content and data fused as part of the Medidata Clinical Cloud and fully integrated with Box, which allows you to search non-regulated content from the non-regulated user interface. This is super cool. So if you have Box, you can search for a drug. We had one, ELND 007. I'm not joking, we did have a drug 007. You search for that drug, it pulls back all of your Word documents, Excel spreadsheets that find with the ELND 007. It also pulls back the clinical trial protocol, SOPs, and everything from the Medidata platform. You click on one of those content objects, it opens it straight in front of you. It's super cool. So, I've already spoken to this slide, but think of it this way. We now have the totality of content and data as part of the Medidata Clinical Cloud, supporting the core aspects of the drug development lifecycle. Today we have ETMF, we have SOP management, and we have archive. I can stand in front of you today to say that we will be delivering the totality of that to include regulatory submissions. in 2018. So you expect to see a great deal more functionality being delivered from Medidata in 2018. And as we've said before, it's all part of the same Medidata Clinical Cloud. As you can see, we've got eTMF, CTMS, and EDC. These are 3 components that need to be knitted together. But you've got all of this integrated, both data and content for data capture and trial planning and management in one location. This allows collaboration by all of those teams on the same platform. Nora, back to you.
Okay, so I'm going to invite you guys up so we can have a panel discussion. Hello? Okay.
Yes?
So we also have Frederico joining us. Frederico, maybe you give yourself a quick introduction.
Thank you, Nora. Frederico Braga, I've been with Medidata for about 6 months. My background in about 7 years in the consulting industry, where I've implemented multiple document management systems, clinical data warehouses, and regulatory information management systems. I have experience with a lot of the logos that you showed up there, Riju, and I've experienced firsthand as a consultant working and implementing these systems, how frustrated users are with the use of these systems. So I'm very happy to be in the panel and to be part of the development of our product.
Thank you. So the first question I have is around compliance in the cloud. So we know that there's still concerns around putting regulated content such as SOPs in the cloud. How do we ensure that vendors are really qualified and that content integrity holds?
Well, the very first thing that we ever did, we put a lot of content into the cloud in the LAN, is you do a vendor audit. I mean, at the end of the day, the cloud is somebody else's data center. Think of it that way. And they have built controls around that data center. They have built controls and compliance around the application. Point number 1, go do vendor audit. Do it as if you were auditing your own IT people. Think of it that way. And out of that will come a very clear picture as to what they do pass or don't pass and what any deficiencies are. Either they're prepared to close those gaps for you or another vendor will. But basically think of it as somebody else's data center, fine. Imagine it was your own IT organization. They have to demonstrate their compliance to you. And of course, they have to prove it in writing.
So we kind of dealt with it a lot as Box, even on the non-regulated side, right? So company's been around for about 12 years, and we were sort of at the beginning of this move to the cloud, if you will, right? So customers are putting their HR systems in the cloud, CRM is going to the cloud. But when it came to these other things like, company picnic pictures, et cetera, there was this concern. It's like, well, are they really safe? And to Kevin's point, yes, you absolutely have to do an audit, and we support a lot of audit. We started, instead of regulatory compliance, we started with security compliance at Box. And as a result of that, to be able to do the proof points, well, one thing interesting is we found out that the same IT shops that sometimes have questionable data centers were a lot more harder on us when they came to audit us. So we had to have solid proof points. So we went out and got literally a litany of certifications, which in of themselves are audits, right? So ISO 27001, SOC 1, SOC 2, HIPAA, FINRA, FedRAMP, like we did all of those. And then when you start stacking those up and look at the cost that goes into getting that compliance, maintaining it is actually even harder because you have to keep the good practices up over time. I think those are the things you use as practical measures to be able to sort of take the fear, if you will,
Right.
out of the...
So security was going to be my next question. We often do different surveys of Medidata about what are buyers' criteria and what are their top concerns, and security is always one of the top concerns.
Yeah.
So if we're looking to purchase an enterprise software system, what is some of the criteria that you should consider evaluating?
I think ditto from before. No, so there is like a cloud consortium. There are these standardized questionnaires, especially over the last few years with multi-tenant clouds becoming more and more prevalent, right? Salesforce was the first one that kind of brought that to market. I think what we're finding is that customers, industries, IT professionals have come together to have sort of these standardized questionnaires, right? So if you go after and do like a cloud security questionnaire, which is fairly prevalent, use that as a standard for audit, I think is a great place to start. The second thing I would look for is, if you were doing this yourself, what would be the cost of getting certain certifications? I think those are important because it proves a certain level of standard. And I would essentially go and look at those capabilities as criteria for proving out the security of a cloud system. Yeah.
Anything else to add?
Yeah, I'd add to that. I mean, security is one of those, it's very much like the temperature, it rises from time to time, particularly with events like Target and others. And boards of directors become super concerned when they read articles like this. They immediately say, could this happen in my company? And of course, they have a fiduciary responsibility to protect the company. And of course, I was hauled in front of the board of directors more than one occasion and asked to explain myself as to how secure our environment was. And then of course, the conversation moves to cloud computing and how secure is this. I put it to them very simply. We simply cannot afford to spend what it is the cloud vendors are spending in terms of security. So we're protecting our little data center, well, several data centers. We're protecting that environment. But the likes of Box, the likes of Amazon, are spending magnitudes more on security because they don't just ruin one company, they ruin lots of them and their reputation along with it. So we did the analysis. It was very clear that a reputable vendor such as Box, such as Medidata, who are certified to these standards, they're spending the money, they have the processes in place. And to me, it made total sense to move everything to the cloud for that reason and many others.
So, Kevin, what makes Medidata and Box uniquely positioned to really change how regulated content is managed?
Yeah, the funny thing about it is we built all these regulated systems and we had them in a LAN and it was great. But here's the thing, nobody goes in and browses a regulated content management system. They just don't. They're entirely task driven. So think about how you get content into a regulated system, be that eTMF, SOPs, kappa deviation management. It is entirely task driven. The user spends the vast majority of their time, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, on the non-regulated side. In other words, on your email, on a Box UI, or Google UI, or whatever it is. So we thought about it. Imagine being able to give somebody access to regulated content from where they're standing, from what they use on a day-to-day basis. And that's super cool. So you don't have them going into another system or another system or another system to find the data or the content. They can get it from where they're sitting today. And that makes a big difference.
Okay. So maybe this is a question for Frederico. What use cases do you see both for sponsors and CROs as well as sites with integrating regulated and non-regulated content management capabilities, and what kind of impact can that have?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a lot of use cases. I think all of us that work in this space, I think the first one is the obvious collaboration around how you write SOPs. I don't know if anyone in the audience enjoys the activity of checking in and checking out the documents. That's kind of, in the 80s, right? And I think that's a great thing in this collaboration between Box and Medidata is that the way the system is built, we can initiate a workflow, apply a template for an SOP, start that in the regulated content management platform, so fully compliant, and then from a certain point on, have the users collaborate outside and, in Box and, the tools that they like and love to use and don't need to do the check-in and check-out. So that's one use case around the SOP management. There's the search, as Kevin mentioned. I think there's other use cases that we're going to explore as well in the future. But the way I think one thing we're simplifying immensely as well in terms of security is if you think of users, sites, data managers, ClinOps people that log into iMedidata, have that ability to work with iMedidata, and then can use the same security credentials to go through the regulated content management, to access the regulated content management, and we can integrate the authorization and permissions of those users also on the non-regulated side. So, from Box, if you are a data manager, you can access certain folders in the regulated content management system from Box. So I think that simplifies that whole security process a lot as well, and brings really great benefits. It's very low friction for the user, and I think ideally that's what people want. They as Kevin was saying, they don't enjoy logging into their regulated content management system to browse. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's, just a couple of things to that. Those are all great use cases. I think of use cases in buckets. It's a certain set of capabilities that you can apply different ways to manage a process. So I think in general, document distribution, right? So if you're a CRO, distribution of content internally, externally with investigators, getting content distributed back to you from investigators, sending a piece of content out for some sort of an approval to an investigator directly from a folder inbox, initiating a workflow and having that finished or signed or approved document or filled out form dumped right back into the same folder in an automated fashion. That whole idea of being able to manage document distribution and getting away from email, and you can come up with multiple use cases, I think is a great benefit in general. Just the time savings, if you start measuring time savings, accuracy, which is important, those sorts of things, I think you see a lot of tangible benefits.
Okay. So we have a couple more minutes left. I want to open it up to the audience. Does anyone else have any questions they'd like to ask?
Easy questions.
It always
You don't have to think of hard questions, just ask an easy question.
I suppose one thing that we didn't cover on when we talk about build for the user wears many hats, and there is nothing more to crystallize the thoughts than the FDA turning up to do an inspection, and it did for me many times. And one of the things, imagine a certain scenario and it happened with our older legacy content management solutions. They wanted to see the SOP on training. Then they wanted to see a full record of everyone who had been trained on that SOP. And these were the kind of things that were going through our minds as we were designing what is now RCM. And I said, can I pull that information in 10 seconds or less? Because the faster you pull the information, the faster you give the information to the inspector, suddenly an air of calm starts to happen. And that's super good. It also, it's calming for our own people so that they know that the information is there and that they can get it. That's it. From a user experience point of view, that's huge.
Well, I'll take off on that. I don't know if you noticed, but about a month ago, the FDA chose Box as their cloud content management platform.
It's been noticed.
Right, and if you look at, it's all right there. If you look at the purpose of the reasons that they chose it for, is exactly this. They want to do agency communication with their customers, which is you guys. They want to be able to use Box for supporting audits.
Yeah.
Fun. And they want, obviously, to kind of bring their own internal house in order, if you will.
Yeah.
So exactly the same reason. So that was, I think, a sort of a tangential benefit for the Box Metadata partnership.
Absolutely.
Right.
Can you share a little bit of how to handle legacy data transition into a wonderful new platform? That has always been my biggest challenge.
That's a great question, and we have a brilliant answer for you at 4 o'clock today, because Medidata decided to move all of its content, because they were previously using Viva, to Medidata RCM. We moved 1.2 million content objects, 850,000 documents, combining SOPs, customer binders, the works. That transition took a number of days. Now, there's planning in terms of mapping the content, but we migrated that quantity of information, or that number of documents, in days. So there is an event at 4 o'clock today. I would strongly recommend that you go and have a look at that one.
So I'll give you sort of a different view of that. This is obviously a metadata project. So let's look at like the 900 or 800 plus customers that Box has in life sciences and 76,000 worldwide, including all industries. We have a very, very high adoption rate. Like it's like in the 90 percentile that when customers buy Box, right? So if AstraZeneca bought 70,000 users of Box, they have 90+% adoption rate, which is really for technology kind of unheard of. And it's not that it's 90+%, it's the speed with which they get to 90%. And a big component of that is effectively being able to manage the transition from legacy onto the cloud, the migration. So what we have done on our end is we have identified the core target systems, you Documentum and eRoom and Intralinks, and we have built offerings for our customers with an eye towards speed of adoption, right? So if we can help them migrate as soon as you don't have that old system alive, you will get adoption, right? So it's really, there's a methodology, if you will, and we help our customers, and our professional services is, actually that's their sole charter, is adoption. When customers buy Box, we want them to use it, because we all know what happens if it's not used. It eventually, the subscription gets canceled, right? So we don't want that. So there are lots of tools available, like we do it. Here's a great example here. We're also finding that SIs, like, the usual ones, Cognizant, Accenture, et cetera, they're also building migration tools.
Is there a question? No, I just wanted to make an additional comment if we have some time. So, like, maybe a little bit of a spoiler of our upcoming version. So as you probably know, like managing document properties, metadata around documents is really useful when you're doing these content migrations, etc. One of the things we will do in our next release is we're using the capability to auto populate metadata, document metadata from the content of the document. And I think a lot of these small things will help a lot in that document migration, because I mean you simply sometimes don't have any document metadata from the source. And if you can pull some of those elements and start to classify them, that I think reduces the effort of that migration substantially.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're out of time. Thank you very much.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.